It's just starting to pre-rut throughout much of the whitetails range, but we've already tagged a few deer, of course processed them for a freezer, and doing the field dressing. I've been using this Cabela's Alaskan guide knife. I really like it, but it's field dressed 3 deer, and the edge, it isn't quite what it was. It's still sharp, but boy, when I'm working on deer, I like that baby razor sharp. Just makes every cut clean. And you'll find when a really sharp knife is much safer to use because you're not putting as much pressure on there to make the cut. And you know, when you're skinning a deer, boy, you can just follow that line between the hide and the meat, do a perfect job of saving that pelt and keeping less hair from getting on the meat. So I like a really sharp knife. And the thing that makes a sharp knife, of course, is an edge. And so what happens as you wear a knife down, that edge actually becomes more obtuse or not as sharp, and this kind of gets blunt. A sharp knife just have a very clean edge. So one would think you just grind both sides to replicate this edge. But what happens is when you're sharpening a knife, what you're doing, of course, is removing metal. And when you're getting down to that, just microns, very, very thin, if you just sharpen on one side, a little wire edge, it's called a wire edge, will kind of go over to the other side. If I only sharpen this side, I'll put a little metal over here. That's called a wire edge. It actually will feel dull. So I want to just share some easy steps I've used to sharpen our field knives. I like a really sharp knife, but I don't need to do anything fancy. I've just got a couple stones here, and I've just got a fine grit stone on here, just a fine grit. This happens to be ceramic because my knife had a really great edge from the factory. So I'm going to take it out of the sheath here. And it had a very narrow, just a great edge. It's called hollow ground, so you can feel it coming in, it goes in, and that makes it go through whatever you're cutting much easier than like an axe, which is thick. That's made to split wood. This is made for cutting. It's a different edge design. So I want to end up with this. And what some people do is they sharpen and they never get sharp because that angle's changing as they go down the stone. So if your angle changes, you're not keeping this same angle, and you just won't end up with a sharp edge. You put too much pressure on one side, not enough on the other. And there's fixed holders. There's a lot of ways to do this, but again, I just like stuff simple. So, and I didn't come up with this. Others have said this, but I use what's called the rule of thumb. And I put my knife on the stone in the broad part of the blade, and I literally just lift it up. And you feel it. You got to do it slow. It's almost like listening to a lock when you're trying to open your gun safe. You can kind of hear that tumbler click. So you do this slow, and you find that factory bevel. You don't want it too high. That's obviously not the factory bevel. That wouldn't cut anything. And if you do it too low, you're just going to take metal off the back of your knife. The edge isn't touching. So rule of thumb is I just right there, I can feel right there is the factory edge. That's where this edge is flat on the stone. Too high and it's tippy, too low and it's tippy. Then I put my thumb here, and I remember where the knife is on my thumb. And I can use my thumb as a guide. My thumb is just going down the stone, holding the knife in the same place. And I err and put my thumb a little closer to the front being the point, not towards the back. So when I'm doing the point, I've got that same angle. And here's one of the biggest secrets I've learned for sharpening a knife fast. And I like to stand up when I'm sharpening knives, so I'm on my kitchen counter. Don't tell Tracy, but I don't move this wrist. This wrist is just locked. So standing up, you can move your whole body, but this wrist isn't moving. Rule of thumb and locking this wrist, find that right angle, and you end up with a sharp knife. Now I've got my thumb on there so that angle's locked. Here's the big miss. Some people say you can only go this way. Some people say only go back. Remember, to sharpen a knife, you're removing a bit of metal. You're removing metal off both sides of the point, so you're doing it even. And it comes to, nothing. You sharpen this side and that side to nothing. That's what sharp is. So I've got my thumb on here still, and I don't want to take my knife off stone, so I go forwards and backwards. And you don't want to run your knife off the end, Because if you run it off the end, if you think about it, right at that moment, you're changing the angle a lot. And that decreases the process of removing metal at exactly the same angle, which is what's required to get sharp. So I don't want to come off this side, boom, put that really fine blade right on the edge of that rock, have it actually dull it, or go off this side. So I get right here. It's almost like running equipment. You will hear a little change in the tone coming off here, the grinding. As you get it sharp and that edge is perfectly flat on the rock all the way, it will be smoother. When there's dings and nicks in your blade, it's going to chatter a little bit more when it's going down through there. And I don't put a lot of down pressure. I literally just put slightly more than the weight of the knife on there. I'm letting the stone do the work. You can see there's a little bit more darkness on I used a white stone this morning so it'd show up. That's metal I'm moving off. And then I'll just take a brush and scrub that out. I don't have any liquid on here. I'm just doing it dry. I've been sharpening on this side, and I don't know if I can get the light reflecting right on there. I can see it, but I don't know if the camera can see it. It's the same shine all the way down through there. If you get a dark spot, you've got chip in your blade or something. But the real secret you don't have to see is take your thumb and you're rubbing away from the blade, not cutting yourself, you're rubbing away, and you feel this little burr. You feel this little burr sticking over. You feel it just kind of catches on your skin a little bit. And this side I've been sharpening, it just slides right off. You don't feel that burr. And you want to develop a burr. And that's how you know you've done a great job on that side. So I've sharpened this side. It's smooth all the way to the point. And when I do this side, I can just feel it. I know I can't communicate this on camera, but I feel that little burr. So I can switch hands. Some people want to change sides of the rock. I can hold it same with either hand. So again, I put this on here in the meat of the blade. And right there's my angle, and I get my thumb closer to the point than the back. It's closer to the point, so when you get to the point, if you're way back here, it's not going to work. You want to get it up here. So again, I just put it about right there. My left wrist is just locked. And the noise probably isn't picking up on the mic, but I can already tell I've taken some of the little rough edge off there because it's not as loud as it was. And that feels smooth. So I'm going on this side, the opposite of the first time, and I don't feel that burr anymore because I pushed it to this side now. And when I started, I was pushing to one side, and then when I flip the knife over, the grinding motion takes that off, but I push over to this side. And it's hard to get away from the burr. A couple ways are to get it really sharp is you can take just a few strokes backwards, really light, just the weight of the knife, just really light. A way I like better is to use a strop. This is just leather strop. You can get them at Bass Course, just a strop. And what I want to do on this one, I only go one way. I go opposite blade. This is leather with a diamond compound on there, or stropping compound. Some people call it jeweler's rouge. It's what jewelers use to really polish up metal. And it's widely available. And white is a little coarser, green is a little finer. So I start on the white side, and I only go backwards. If I go forward, I'll cut into my leather and put a pit in the strop. That's no good. So I want to take that burr off. And if you're dragging backwards, you can see how to take that burr off. So on this, the angle is not as important, but just the weight of the knife. If you put too much pressure on there, if this is my strop surface, and this is my knife blade, and I have too much pressure, it's actually pressing down into leather and it'll bounce up and dull your knife. So I just want my knife blade just floating across there. This angle's too steep, but floating across. And the whole purpose is to remove any little burr that's on there. So I'm starting with a coarser grit jeweler's rouge on here, compound, a lot of people call it. And I'm just making this stroke just and I can feel it dragging. And I start at the point, and I come back. I start at the point, come back, and ideally on a strop, I alternate each side. So I go down. Now I'm going slow, being really precise here. It's not how many strokes you make, it's the precision of each stroke. And that darkness you see on the surface, that's metal that's been removed. I'll give you a little hint. You're out in the timber, or maybe you're elk hunting, your knife's getting a little dull. Take your belt off, go around a small tree, hold it really taut with the other hand, and if it's a leather belt, and the unfinished side with all the leather sticking up can be a strop. Now, it won't work as good as a piece of leather like this with the compound on there, but it'll sure tune up that edge a little. You're out in the middle of timber, it's a great way to do it. But again, I'm listening for that change of sound. About 15 strokes on each side roughly. I don't count. I actually go by feel and sound. You can tell if you're doing it and your knife's vibrating, it may be dull. Now, you don't start stropping until the knife's pretty sharp already. It's not going to take big chunks out of a blade. So this is just, stropping is only to get this burr off the blade. That's what its focus is. It's polishing the edge. You think about polishing something with a mirror finish. And if you had a mirror finish on both sides of your knife and at the same narrow angle, it'd be sharp. So a lot of people shave their arm. I gotta tell you, I've sharpened some of my knives. I don't have a lot of hair left on my arm, but a really good test to see how sharp a knife is without much pressure, will it just cut paper? I'm not holding this firm, I don't have it like super taut, like, you might hold your fishing line really tight to make a clean cut. I've just got this paper here, and obviously I haven't tried this yet, so let's just see. Oh yeah, that baby is sharp. Now, I don't know if this is super sharp for processing deer, but if you can cut through paper at a curve, because remember there's no pressure on the other side, your knife is super shaving sharp. So let's just see here. Oh yeah. Almost curve sharp, which is like hair splitting sharp, but just cutting like this, that baby is sharp. My knife wasn't in bad shape. I hadn't been like cutting through a bolt or something. So I used a pretty fine grained stone, and I found my angle by just picking it up and feeling that flat spot. If you have trouble doing that, what a lot of people do, a little tip, and this was actually, I think, originally created by Mr. Buck of Buck Knives, but he would use a Sharpie and darken that edge, and then you just make a stroke or two, and if you're not removing that dark edge, that Sharpie right on the edge, you don't have the right angle. And if you're only removing it right on the edge and nothing behind there, you're too steep up. And if you're not removing it at all, you're too far this way. So you can just take a Sharpie, cover the edge of the knife, make a few strokes on there, and see if it's coming off. I hope this tip helped you, because I think learning how to sharpen a knife is just a really solid woodsman skill to have. Certainly great to have a really sharp knife when you're out hunting, not only for processing game, but maybe starting a fire or for safety reasons. And I hope you all take time to sharpen your knives and have a great season.